Hey, good morning. It's it's April Fool's Day.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
As
maybe
was,
we're not here.
that would be the joke, wouldn't it?
Maybe there's no show. No, that
That would be
wouldn't
no
be.
fun. No, definitely not. So, welcome everyone. My name is Rich Ross, um, and I'm joined as always by my colleague here, Chris.
Everybody.
And today we're going to talk a little bit about. We're going to go a little deeper into that login, logout component, Blazor component that we've been kind of leading up towards. Talking a little bit about authentication and some of the things you can do from that .NET new project and going without having authentication in there. What can you do to kind of make authentication happen? So should be another fun session around that. Chris, how are you doing this morning?
Pretty good. So here, I mean, all over the world, it was a holiday yesterday. It was Easter, which is often, especially in the U.S., a time when like family gets together, and so did that, and that was good.
Cool.
And some, I feel like it's different everywhere in Pennsylvania, in the state of Pennsylvania, but also all over the US as to when different spring breaks are. So it is
Mm-hmm.
possible that some families still have a few days off left, or maybe this was their return to school. Or I know in some states or in some places, it was earlier or it's later. And it's just a real locally driven thing out here. So if you're watching from abroad and you think that's kind of strange, that's well, some things are very locally driven. So
Definitely true. Definitely true.
yeah.
Um, One thing I do want to share, because I know we've
Uh-huh.
talked about this before. Let me see if I can bring this up real quick. Um, let's do that. How does that present? That's not bad. Okay. I can
Okay.
make it a little bigger. That might help.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the recent ASP.NET Community Stand-Up, and the reason I'm bringing it up is because something we talked about before, which was smart components. And smart components are ways to very quickly get your application up and running with some of the generative AI models. And if you think about some of the stuff that we did when we were showing some of the Hello Dolly application that we were working on, I had to know about the large language model that I was talking to, and I had to know about the generative AI components and tokens, and basically a lot of the under the cover stuff that smart components looks to take away from you. So you don't have to, other than wiring it up to an OpenAI instance, didn't have to do a lot of the more technical things related to prompts and engineering and things like that. So these are a way to get started with doing AI, and the team is certainly looking for feedback. There's a survey. I think it's that same URL link /survey at the end to understand how you're using them. Are there other things that you might want to see included in there? And Steve Sanderson does it's about an hour and a half long. So it's definitely over an hour of him digging into these components and some of the directions they're going into, and goes past some of the things that we showed previously. So put that
Yeah.
out there in case that was of interest, because I thought it was really
Yeah.
awesome to see. And yeah,
I
check
I
that
mean,
out if
I
you're
don't
interested.
this is so everybody can understand, because clearly this show, the Dev Talk Show, has a large production staff behind it, and daily pre and post production meetings. But
Yeah.
this is something I wanted to try out this week, if or
Oh,
soon.
cool.
Soon is see if we can dig it. So obviously they dug into it on the .NET, the community
Community
stand
stand
up,
up.
which is great because we talked about on this show the Steve Sanderson hosted video that was announcing the experiment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it shades of Blazor United last year, in my opinion. Like here's Steve again. Here we go with something cool that he's announcing as an experiment,
Yep.
and just thought like, okay, what can we do with this? And but then they had this great show last week, so that's cool. And again, like it says right there in the middle, it's experimental because if it's just, I think it's good to set the expectation. Like maybe it's a .NET 9, maybe it's not ever. I mean, it just depends kind of on on what makes sense after the community gives feedback. So
Yeah.
it is really helpful for folks if you give this a shot and get into the GitHub issues and both join the conversation as to things you find, but also just what you think and how is it going to help you or not help you, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. So some good things can come from that. For me, in the Blazor repo, sometime during the release candidate cycle, is when I went in and asked. It wasn't an issue as in like I think something's broken. It
Okay.
was just I'm really not sure how, if I'm using InteractiveAuto, how do I create a component that works both client side and server side when it comes to resources? And these could be
Yeah.
like server resources, network resources. And it started a very long conversation with some great help from people. And it really kind of illustrated it for me. But you can tell that even after I was kind of satisfied with the issue, people still had questions. So
Mm-hmm.
just being the launching point for that is valuable, I think, for the team to understand like, oh, they're on the inside of it. So here's great to hear on the outside, hey, we're all struggling with something. And they go, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So,
That's what's great about developing in open source, right? It's all
yeah.
out there for us to ask our questions and hopefully get some answers that can help us move forward with the project. So awesome.
Yeah. And I think before we start today, one thing I would like to do, which I will get up on my screen here,
Okay.
is point out that there is a GitHub repository. Speaking of GitHub repositories, of course, this requires me to click present and share screen. And there it is. So out at the TheDevTalkShow, which is, and then let's get this into chat as well. And into show notes if you're watching, because if you're watching on YouTube or Twitch live, there is a live chat where we're happy to hear some questions or hear from you and just your experience. If you've got something to share with us about how we could do things better, then that's fantastic. But this repo in the TheDevTalkShow organization called Blazor Auth from scratch, it goes up pretty much to where we left off. Where the very last commit here, if I drop into components, is where we add the wonderfully named my own login component, which I think was just named that way so that it wouldn't be confused with anything else.
Right.
And that's where we got to the last time we met here, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So this particular repo, you've got the six commits here, which granted, we could talk a little bit about how you would navigate through this because these aren't on branches.
Right.
But it walks the path from all you've done is click file new project, and it even tells you .NET new Blazor int none was what I used.
Okay.
And then it walks through to say, okay, so this is the very minimum to get authorized view working, and then now you want to add authentication to the homepage, and then add cookie to create user, and then move to a component. So it kind of goes step by step. And I want to keep adding to this as we go. In a way, it almost serves as a sort of instruction manual. And secondly, I think it allows us, as we are exploring forward, to have a place to safely say, hey, I got to here, let's get it on a branch, so that we can reset to where the show was easily. Because it's something that's been troubling me for a while, where I come in and I say, oh man, I went a little bit further ahead. How do I reset back to where I was? So that's an issue.
A little bit.
Yeah. So let's see. I need to get this. Oh, actually, that's not going to open, is it? I think it's going to yell at me. Oh, no, it didn't. That's interesting. Okay, so let's see where we're at just to make sure, because that's exactly what I was just talking about. We have our login component. Great. And so I think if I run this, I believe if I run this, what we're going to see is we're going to see that we can log in a user. And for anybody who is watching and looking at the code, this is not, at no point is this meant to be production level code, especially because the app itself accepts anybody typing in any name here. But But the point is more to, in a way, I think it's twofold. One is it might illustrate to you, even if you've been using ASP.NET for years, what really happens under the covers with the identity platform, which is built in, the ASP.NET identity platform is what's being used.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole concept of claims and users and what does authorized mean and what does it really do is kind of interesting. So we basically are doing it's not for the purposes of the security, but just basically saying to log in, all you got to do is type in a name. That's it. You just type in a name. So like here's Chris Gomez right here. So I click submit, and I have a breakpoint. So let's continue through that. Okay. Now I've continued through that. So this is where we left off, to where you get this kind of confusing sort of state where you go, why didn't anything change?
Mm-hmm.
And I can't exactly hit refresh here because this is a form. And what do browsers do when you refresh on a form that has been submitted? They say, oh, did you want to resubmit the form? And you can kind of get into a rabbit hole here.
Yep.
So there's no code that is recognizing after login. There's no code that refreshes the page. There's no code that updates anything. So if I click over to weather and then click back, we are logged in. And that's kind of where we left off.
Okay.
So
that submit button gets you there, but it doesn't refresh the page or do the thing that needs to be done to say, hey, look what happened.
Right. It doesn't refresh the page or anything. And so what happens is you're kind of stuck on some of this code here that says, and previously, when we were doing this a few weeks ago, we weren't using authorized view. And part of the reason for that is because it wasn't working for us. We hadn't figured out some of the under the covers pieces, such as the authorized route view, which supplies a cascading parameter that is needed by authorized view.
Right.
So we didn't know that yet. And we also did not know, we were learning about the authentication state provider, because for now we have kept this commented out. This may have to come back.
Okay.
And so it's kind of sitting here waiting because I'm figuring, my thinking is when I switch over to a different set of code here, this is the file new project template. If you go ahead and tell Blazor, I want the individual user accounts authentication, and they have this on line 16. So my suspicion is this is going to come back. If routes.razor is doing authorized route view, and this was enough to get us going, I'd like to think, and maybe I'm wrong, that there must have been a reason for it to be brought back into the service build here. And I don't know what that answer is at this time. So in tune of saying, if we didn't build it, we're not including it in here, not because we're being stubborn, but more to learn. All of this is to learn. None of this is to suggest that I'm going to go to production with this code as it sits right now.
Right.
So
we know that if we ever get stuck, that might be the first thing we uncover.
Yeah. Absolutely. It could definitely happen. And, we were messing around with authentication scheme names, basically showing that when you supply an authentication scheme name for an aspect of identity, basically saying, hey, I want a cookie. Well, you got to supply a string, and there are defaults. But I went ahead and kind of said, like, well, let's not use the defaults. And we had to use that everywhere. We had to say, you're being logged in for that auth scheme. And we just changed it to happy days just to prove that it really was doing something.
Yep.
So I'm going to see about changing it back to TDTS cookie. And we'll replace all. And that makes sense. Just a few occurrences there. So I think we're okay. And now I'm not logged in anymore because I've actually changed cookies. So definitely that makes sense that I'm not logged in. And if I open the developer tools and go to cookies, I'm going to see the old cookie.
Because that didn't get removed.
It didn't get removed. And then look at this. I wonder where this one's from. Do I get to find out? Is it from our show last time? Maybe. Or, well, let's see what happens when I log in again. And then I have to do some jazz here. And so, okay, still logged in. I can get rid of this Happy Days cookie happily. The reason, what have I done to create 2 anti-forgeries? I'm not really sure. But now that I'm logged in, if I get rid of this cookie, I hit the delete button there. And then now everything's just all a mess. It shows that I'm not
authentication
authorized. On it. Yeah, whether it has authentication on it. Yeah, no, that's a good point. Is if we head back, I don't think it has authentication on it in the, well, maybe it does. In the GitHub repo, maybe it does. Yes, but we put the authorized attribute on it. So what happens is it says, well, let me redirect you to login. And we don't have that.
We don't have
we don't have a login page.
Right.
We have a login component.
Yes.
We don't have a login page. So
one question came up in the chat. And I think this is related to that line that we have commented out around the cascading authentication component. And I don't know. So if you know, my take on that is it's not related to the WASM bit, because when we set up that project was just a .NET interactive server, and we turned on authentication. So the WASM.
Well, you're talking about the project that we've been referring to?
Yes.
This is an auto project. This
both.
is InteractiveAuto, meaning that
it could be either.
Yes. So in fact, let me bring it up.
All right. All right. Then I withdraw my answer then.
Yeah.
Because that's not it.
Yeah. Because here's client and here's and again, it's unfortunate for people that it might seem like I'm jumping around, but we named that project include because on that particular show, we purposely did one with auth and then one without, and then we were diffing them.
Yeah.
To try to figure out what's different and
how it works.
I actually suspect what the lanky Scottish nerd is saying is correct. That's been a suspicion of mine for a while, is that when we get to trying to get a project that has the client project, which your components go in here if you want WebAssembly support, is because you switch to this state provider in the client. I believe that's correct. You switch to this state provider, both in the server and client. This is the client's program CS. And then if I go back to the server's program CS, which is definitely feels like we're hopping around here, it switches. So I feel like, that probably what happens is instead of state rolling down through the components, it's rolling down through this. But what's interesting about our little aside here is I embarked on this to create a component that was not page routable. It's still logged in, it's still logged out, but it wasn't page routable, right? And there's a reason for that, which maybe we will try to do today, which is but first I was going to try to get logout working. And it turns out that when you try to get logout working, that actually brings some new things into focus that even if you don't go down this path, it might make it more understandable what's happening in the template.
Okay.
And why. And if I want a hint, the hint is here on line 73, app.map additional identity endpoints, which we've talked about.
Yeah.
But in our app that is from scratch, we have not done that yet. It's very simple. We haven't strayed too far from the beginning, where we are still a server-side rendered only project, at least for the moment. And we have added services that are giving us authentication, but that's it. There's nothing else here. So at least from the template point of view, nothing else has changed. We did come in here and switch When you don't include authorization, you do not get the authorized route view component in your template. And we just by adding this here, it started rolling down authentication state. It might have been interesting to remove this and see. I just don't know for sure if that means anything. But this is what, once we did this, once we brought this in, because we spotted it in the template, the difference between including and not including, then we found that our own component worked. So what is this here? This is the component. This is the login component. So I have to go to home. We found that authorized view started working. Early in this game, we weren't even using authorized view. Remember, we were doing like if context.
Yes.
You know? Yeah. Which, I mean, you can do that, but it felt kind of a couple things that I didn't like about it. One is I said, you know, we're going on off. Now we're going really far afield from what's given to you in the box. Like, is there a way we could kind of hook back up to something more standard like authorized view, which people are going to be expecting if you're a Blazor developer? And second, I think what we're going to see is that the server-side rendered model supports HTTP context and your use of it more easily because, well, you're on your server-side app.
Right.
And for years in MVC, Razor Pages, we have been interrogating HTTP context if we want to. We've been interrogating it. It's been available in every controller. It's just there. You can inject it. It's super easy. And that world changes a little bit with interactivity because the whole point of interactivity is to build a component that's totally ignorant of the page and the context behind it. It's just, I'm something you can put anywhere, client side, server side. So you don't necessarily have access to this stuff.
Okay.
Which is in the docs, by the way.
Yeah.
But it's interesting when you see it for yourself. So let's see. Yeah, let's see. First thing that we're going to do now is, so we can log in. But that little refresh thing is bothering me a little bit. So let's talk about, let's talk about what we would do to deal with that. Now, first of all, there's a little bit of a leftover artifact from last time.
Okay.
Folks who've been following along might remember that our home page, a routable component, routable. I'm talking like some of the folks with a slightly different accent on the team. I mean, maybe many Americans would say routable too, but I'm actually trying to say routable, meaning that it can be routed places. And that's a very, I don't know, look, I'm a West Coast kid, so maybe that's what we say on the West Coast, and maybe in other parts of the country, they'd say routable or the world. But there's also Blazor's concept of root components, and I want to try not to confuse those even in my head.
Okay.
So home.razor is a page component. We know that because of the page attribute. And Blazor drops it in the components pages folder by default. There's nothing that's telling you have to do things this way. At least I'm pretty sure we could put them wherever we want. We were doing you probably remember, we had the form, the edit form, and everything was just right here.
Right.
We built this login component in the infamous last 15 minutes of the show last time.
Yep.
And we moved the cub, we copied it in, but we left this here. And it wasn't on purpose. We were just in a hurry.
Yeah.
So we left this here, and it doesn't have to be here. So I can actually take all of this, and now our home, for now, I mean, we may have use for something on the page later, but now the page component looks like this.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah. So if I run it now, and let's just make sure everything works after doing that. Login is me. I've got this funny situation where there's no refresh. So let's go. There it is. I'm logged in. So definitely we're in the same place we were, and we were able to delete extraneous code.
Which is nice.
Yeah, because now we truly were using a component to log in.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but the problem is, after the component is done logging in, we don't do anything to refresh page state. And you might think of several different ways to deal with this problem. You might say, well, maybe the component could notify outside pages. And I certainly think that's possible, but I think it gets kind of weird because, again, while component communication is an important part of Blazor, I feel like the more independent a component can be, the less you're kind of dependent on, I've created a thing, and actually I'm not really getting the benefits of Blazor anymore because every component that every time I use this component, my page has to be wired a certain way. That could get strange.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what I did is I said, okay, well, what do they do? What do they do in the include project? And
All right.
where we're going to end up is we're going to end up looking at map additional identity endpoints. But I'm going to go ahead and stray from that for a second, just to get something working. So as you are looking through the templates, you may have already come across the navigation manager. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to inject, if I can spell correctly, I'm going to inject the navigation manager, and IntelliSense is bringing it up for me. And it's from ASP.NET Core Components. So that tells me this is a Blazor component that's in our toolbox, provides an abstraction for querying and managing URI navigation. So I say navigation manager, and I know that it's very common standard is to inject inject the service or component or whatever it is we're using, and then to name it. You got to give it a variable name locally. This is kind of like you declaring it. This is all in one. If you're new to Blazor, this is kind of like declaring it in the code block and setting up the injection, the dependency injection, so that way, when this component fires up, it's already loaded up.
Right.
Okay. I struggle sometimes with the clarity of it having the same name. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a lowercase n. It's a small, subtle thing. Because, I kind of ran into this here with HTTP context being the same name. What I forget sometimes is that sign in async is an extension method, but it's an extension method that still requires an instance. It's not like an extension method where you can use the class name itself. It's not static, right?
Right.
So, any case, navigation manager. Well, look at this. Look at it. Copilot's telling me navigation manager has a method called navigate to, which is absolutely correct. So if I say navigate to /, I'm basically saying here, head over to the home page.
Yeah.
And what I believe is going to happen now is I believe it's that we're going to get an exception. But let's find out. No, actually, we didn't. Okay. So that seemed really like almost too easy, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So if I say, put my name in and I click submit, then it spins for a little bit, but something interesting happened behind the scenes. An exception was thrown. Exception of type Microsoft ASP.NET Core Components navigation exception was thrown. Now, that sounds bad. The exception settings say break when this exception type is user unhandled. So Blazor is stepping in here. I'm sorry, not Blazor. Visual Studio is stepping in here and saying, even though, like, I'm stopping because nobody handled this.
Right.
But it turns out most of the time when you get an unhandled exception and you're coding in Visual Studio and you go ahead and continue, unless you have some top level handler, this is the end of the road. You're going to drop out of your app because the app's going to crash, whatever.
Right.
But if I click continue, it does the refresh. And that, if you're anything like me, that threw me.
Sure.
So the nice thing was, though, is that was a clue. It turned out to be a clue because my first thought with an exception is, was it bad or not? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I thought exceptions were, oh, well, like something bad's about to happen. So let's go visit our friend, the include template, which is file new project, InteractiveAuto, include authentication.
Okay.
Things are a little different here. And the way we're going to figure that out is let's go to login. Okay. And in their login page has is this where the logout happens too? You know what? I'm going to forget where the log out happens. So maybe I'm trying to think, when you log out, was there a logout button? Let's
On
go
the
find.
out of the box? I don't think so.
Yeah, there might not have been, huh?
I think it was just sign in.
The problem is I don't know if I remember my sign in because it's been a little while. Oh, we have my own login. Yeah, let's see. You come into login, and let me see if I remember how to log in here real quick. Was it this? Was it? You know what's interesting is autocomplete is giving me a hint here. Oh, and look at that. It was correct. So one thing to be clear about is I should have reversed this, but remember when we started here and we added a login component with a logout button, and this all works, by the way.
Right.
But this is logout from Blazor. So what they've done is they've put it here in the menu. So that was from the template, that logout right there from the template. Boom, it all works. Everything's great. So let's head back and find that, which means if I head to routes.blazor, I've got redirect to login. That wasn't it. I feel like we're going to see, I thought we would see it, and it's just interesting that I'm having trouble finding it. So I guess it's not that important, really, because what's more important is the implementation. The implementation is what's more important here. And I kind of wish that I would have maybe sussed that out a little bit more before we did the show, but that's okay.
Okay.
Remember map identity external endpoints? Remember that guy?
Yes.
That particular piece
That's
sitting right here? Let's drill into that with an F12. What the heck is this doing? So I'm in Visual Studio. I'm hitting F12. I could also right-click on it and say go to implementation, probably Control F12, go to definition. Sometimes you need go to implementation if you're drilling into an interface, but I'm going to hit F12 here, and we are getting to code. And here's what's interesting about this code. At first glance, I think to myself, wait a second, is this code in the framework? Oh, no, it's in my project.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's one of the peculiar things we found about this is that you don't, when you use the template, you do use stuff that's in the box, it's in the .NET platform. And when you F12 in, you're using the source server to get it. This is in your project.
Right.
So you own it. It's yours.
Mm-hmm. You own it, but it got dropped in there for you because of the selections you made.
Yes, it got dropped in for the selections you made. That's absolutely right. But like anything, any code, now it's on you.
It's in your project, yeah.
Yep. And what they do is they are using minimal APIs to create some APIs right within your project. One of them being Logout. And this could be why I had trouble finding like a component or anything, because if all you simply do is just add, all you got to do is add like a link to /logout, and this works. And what it does is it says, I want to call sign out async on the sign in manager. But let's drop a little bit further down to an interesting one called, or maybe it's just, I thought maybe it's somewhere else. I thought I was going to find the use of the navigation manager, but I'm not going to. So the point is that they create a a minimal API to do this. And so that does a couple things for you. One of them is by creating a minimal API to log out, this guarantees that any component that calls the logout is going to the server. By definition, you have to go to the server to get here, even if you're on WASM.
Yeah.
So
good point.
That feels a little bit like Hotel California if you're on WASM, right? Like, how do you log out? But maybe that's okay, because how do you log out? Once you're logged in the WASM client world, you as the developer are taking it a little bit on faith that the login happened from a server. So I'm going to continue to allow this user to use the app.
Mm-hmm.
And this puts a responsibility on you as a developer to think very carefully about what can a logged in user do and what should I do if they were somehow revoked. Like maybe back in server land, they've been revoked their access.
Yeah.
So I think what it leads to is a pattern where when it comes time to store something, which almost inevitably means go back to a server,
Mm-hmm.
that you have to allow for that to fail unauthorized. And then how do you handle that in the front end? And these are all things that we can't answer for you. These are specific to your application. What does it mean for someone to no longer be authorized, even though as a client you thought they were for a long time? In some applications, it could be harmless, just like, well, they're just not going to get any more data. So it's a chat app, so they just don't get any more messages. No big deal. But what if it's an app? What if you're a insurance claims adjuster and, we don't want this person adjusting any more claims, but their app has been logged in, and it remains logged in. So why does any of this matter? Let's go back here. Navigation manager, navigate to. Okay. I need a logout now. And because we're trying to do everything through components, and look, the point of this is to say to everyone watching, this might be unnecessary. And maybe the better move is what we see in the template. But what if we created in components, let's go ahead and say, add a razor component, and just to try to keep things named consistently, but also so that we know for sure that it's ours, I'm going to call this my own logout.
Okay.
And my own logout is going to look a lot like my own. It's going to look a lot, I think, like my own login. So I'm going to go ahead and take this. I think I'm going to need HTTP context. So let's come into code and take that. And then if I take that, then immediately I think what's going to happen, I'm expecting it to complain, but we're in the my own logout and we're going to need something. We need some way to get people to log out. And let's just say I try to use a button. Okay. I try to use a button and a button named logout. I have said that when somebody, the button's not named logout, the button's value is logout. That's what's going to be on the button. I'm already getting a complaint here that, wait a second. Yeah. I think you were going to say it.
The method doesn't exist.
Right. It's saying you're telling me to go log out. It doesn't exist. Let's see if it'll refactor it for me. Oh, it will. That's cool. I think that's cool. And what's it going to do? I can either have a void version or I can have a task version. So for now, let's create the void version just for now.
Makes sense.
And it's not implemented. No big deal. I can even take mouse event args if I want. I don't need them. It doesn't matter to me. What if I take that HTTP context and I look for a method sign out async, just like sign in async. So just like sign in async, this is an extension method, so it's not finding it.
Okay.
So it's an extension method that lives in, this namespace we've been using quite a bit. Microsoft ASP.NET Core authentication. We've been using this namespace previously.
Right.
Okay. So now that I have added this namespace. Now, when I dot in, I'm going to get sign out async.
Okay.
You have to tell
it's
it.
asking you.
Yeah, you have to tell it what auth scheme you're signing out of.
Yeah.
Thank you. You know, here's Copilot jumping in saying, well, this is what you've been using all along. So that's cool.
Yeah.
Now, when somebody signs out, I like how it's even already saying, like, you probably want to navigate them somewhere, don't you? I love that. I love that. So let's go ahead and say, sure. But then that means I'm going to have to inject. Yep. So that's great. I love how this is, you know, what's great about this is, like, even if you never use this on your own, now it's not a mystery what all this stuff does.
Right.
Navigate. Oh, I know what Navigation Manager does. And you might be able to take good advantage of that.
Yeah.
So
I would.
Yeah, go ahead.
I know it gave us the mouse event args. I'm kind of surprised that I don't know that we're going to need it, or that it's not going to error because you're not passing those event args into.
Yeah, that I'm not using them.
Yep.
So I believe they get filled because you've clicked, because I think I've done that before, but we can take them out and that's fine. Now there's something else we can do here, and this is neither here nor there. Some people may notice that sign out async was awaitable. And it can really sometimes, like, bother some people, like, oh, but I should await it. So you can always use this version. This works fine too. Okay. So in any case, now if I do this and I'm leaving a question hanging, which was why an exception. So let's see, the page comes up and right now, I didn't change anything in the app. So I ran the app, but I'm not using this component anywhere. So of course we don't see anything. So let's come back here. Well, where would I put the log? When I'm authorized is when I want a login component. So let's say my own logout, and that's it. Like that's all. At least
the beauty of components.
Yeah, this all seems really promising, right?
Yeah. I get the feeling you've seen the back of the book.
Yeah, right. So my own logout pops up and you click logout and wait a second. I click and nothing seems to be happening. It's not even like I have a sense that it's not navigating away. So maybe this code's not running. So let's set a breakpoint and watch our on-click method come in here.
Well, so one quick
you might
question.
say it. Yeah, go ahead.
So when we did the login, was it an interactive component or
no?
It was not. Okay.
Remember, we are not yet in this project. We are not yet using interactivity. Okay. Not yet, but you got the answer right. You got it right.
Having run into this on other button clicks. Yeah.
The moment you start using Blazor event handling, which is what we're doing here, not web event handling. There is a difference. Blazor event handling. Okay. We may need to drop back on that a bit. Yeah. Okay. So, right. What does that mean? So we are using event handling here. And how do I know we're using it? Because we did on click, and right here, this is important. Even though it might seem like just words. When that on click method, when I mouse over it, IntelliSense tells me that it is a member of event handlers, all part of Blazor components. Now, I'm not going to tell you that by itself is the clue, and you should just be like, oh, obviously it must be using interactive event handling. But when you start to think about it a little bit, and if you really, really go through the docs on event handling, what kind of clicks in, pardon the pun, is that's not the click handler in JavaScript. Okay. That's being routed up by interactivity. So that means if you are in WebAssembly is taking care of this for you. And if you are in Blazor Server, then Blazor Server is taking care of this for you. So that means we have now, for the first time, come up with a reason in this particular implementation to add interactive server components. And for people who haven't been watching the series, it's been one of those things where it's like, let's intentionally not use things till we need them.
Right. So yeah, go ahead. I'll wait till you get a break.
All I was going to say is, so I got to add this down here. That's all I was going to say.
So then with the button, there's an event that gets kicked off. So we've got to make sure that we've got the interaction for the button. What does the login component do that is different?
Why is the login component different? That's a great question. So the login component gets to do its job two different ways. Number one, the edit form is compatible with server-side rendering, as long, I would say, as you do a few things.
Okay.
You have to continue using what would be considered a traditional HTTP model. For example, this edit form is not being handled by a button click event. It is being handled by an on submit. And on submit,
it's going to post back.
It's going to post back, right? It's going to do things the old-fashioned, and I say old-fashioned like it's bad, the old-fashioned way on the web. No, it's great. It's submitting a form.
Yep. Okay.
So the fact that it's submitting a form is a good first step. But remember this all. Hopefully, this all kind of ties together. Remember when we made this form the first time and it wasn't submitting and we were driving ourselves crazy until we added this.
Yes.
On server side, if you add a supply parameter from form attribute, you are telling Blazor that this model is going to be filled not by model binding, not by the traditional model binding that when I say traditional, I mean Blazor traditional, because for quite some time now, people have been using model binding in forms just like this. But since every Blazor app in .NET 7 and before, every Blazor app was interactive. You were always either Blazor server or you were Blazor WASM. You made that choice at the beginning.
Okay.
But we're in a world now where you might not be. You might be server-side rendered, which is what we stuck to stubbornly until this point.
So in that vein, could we have our login component be wrapped in an edit form and not need the event capability?
Oh, the logout form, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay. So the problem that I think is happening with the logout form is that, yes, we could wrap it in a form, and I think that would get us there. I think you're right. I think it would. I think what's interesting, though, is now I hope a side effect of doing this is it sort of makes it clearer what happens. Like now I need interactivity so that, and it wasn't because of logging out. It was because we are using a Blazor event handler, something in the components namespace instead of submitting a form. So when I say log out now, oh, it didn't do it. Why didn't you do it? I expected to see this fire. So I did add. Didn't I add it? Oh, actually, you know what? I know what it is. That's not enough. So I have added support. I've added support for interactivity. I've added support, but I did not say that my logout component was using interactive server, because this page does not say that it is interactive.
Right.
The page is still server side. So if I come here and I say render mode equals, render mode, and then I think I just say
interactive server, right?
Yeah.
And that's interesting.
Do I have to say equals? I think I have to say equals. Yeah, there we go.
Okay. It's interesting you're doing that on the component. So you're making up that decision at design time, how you want that component to render. Right.
See, now the handler works.
Okay.
And now we will log out, except there's a problem. And this is more where we might, there's 10 minutes to go, and I know we have a hard stop at 9 for stand-up.
Yep.
So now everything seemed like we were doing great in terms of, okay, so I'm going to give up. I'm going to add interactivity. I think you have a great point, by the way, though, that the two ways I would look to solve this is if you really, really wanted to have a logout component, that that component could use a form to submit. However, I'm a little more inspired by what they do in the template, saying to myself, why do I need to go through all that trouble when a link will do the same job and I can map an endpoint on the back end that'll do my logout? So pop question, why is HTTP context suddenly a null reference? And the answer is because we're in Blazor server now.
Oh, okay.
So that login component is in Blazor server, and we have been happily living in Blazor server-side rendering, which I know is an easy way to get confused with server. In some respects, I almost would like to just say Blazor Signal R all the time, but I have to be careful because somebody watching the show, what the heck is Blazor Signal R, right? So they may have never seen it before. So we're now in Blazor server, and so Blazor server is saying, yeah, I don't get an HTTP context, and I think where we are heading is, and this goes all the way back to what our friend Lanky Scottish Nerd said at the beginning of the show.
At the beginning, yeah.
Is I believe this is where we are slowly heading back towards. This is on its way. But to your point, we could take a step back and we could say we can still stubbornly get Logout working server-side rendered. We could do it. We could either do it with a link back to an identity mapped endpoint, using minimal APIs that are built right into this server. We could do that. Or we could do the other option that you said was, well, the logout form could just be server side the way the login form was.
Mm-hmm.
So in some respects, by exploring this, I would hope that all of us, including me, have learned a little something about the Blazor lifecycle and how components interact, and solving some of the mysteries, or at least getting it really locked in as to while you're coding day to day and you build something, you do on click and you say, why isn't it working? Why isn't on click working?
Yeah.
Well, on click isn't working because on click, or any of the other event handlers that you get. Where is my own logout? Where did that go? Oh, I'm in the include project. Sorry. When I come back to our project, why is on click? Yeah, then this is all crashed. It's never coming. It's sorry, Blazor, you're done. So, this requires interactivity, and it turns out there's other, just to show people. Let's create another button, and let's look. You have all kinds of method, and so you don't have to use it on buttons either. You could build something that is retrieving these, being interactive, just your regular old HTML. Like I could create a div, and I can't quite come up with the concept right here on the fly, but I could say on mouse move,
enter, move,
yeah, and I can take these mouse movements, and then, in fact, I love how it's even trying to help, right? And it's actually not a bad idea, frankly. And I can create an async handler, and then could come in, and we could finish this off, because I think the problem here is oh wow, what is it trying to do? I thought it would have been interesting. No, we don't. Nobody wants system threading. Is we could come in here now, and I could say, okay, what is mouse X? This would be something if this really worked pretty quickly. It's a double. Okay, so that means I need a double up here. And I need a double here. I don't know if I have to worry because those are structs. I don't think I have to worry or care. And I think Blazor also has some null protection up in Razor syntax land, and now you're not happy because not everything returns a value. So I probably should not have used the async one. I should probably just do void mouse move. And I don't know, is that going to work? That would be cool. But it's going to require interactivity.
Yeah.
So when I come here and, oh, look at that. As long as I move within the component, right? If I'm outside the component, I don't get anything. But in the component, in the div, it's doing its job. The moment I take interactivity away, and what's mysterious about this is the fact that you can take the interactivity away and nothing blows up, which can almost be more frustrating, right?
Yeah.
As a developer. But, I take it back. Look at this. It blew up because the component is still saying it. Right. So I got to get rid of that too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So Blazor's doing good there. It's going like, you said you wanted interactive, but I don't know. Now watch, let's see if I eat my words here. Logout should no longer do anything, and the mouse does nothing either.
Yeah. That's just a static page from the server.
Right. So that's a key point, is that once you start using these attributes, which look an awful lot like JavaScript versions of these, they're not. They are Blazor component handled. You need interactivity. So you might ask me a question, how do I do this stuff if I want to be purely server-side rendered? And the answer, frankly, is you drop into JavaScript. Like, that's the answer.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Right? There's no reason I can't do that. There's literally no reason that I can't write real JavaScript code here, put a real JavaScript file. It doesn't have to be in the code block. Yeah. I mean, if I really wanted to, it could be right here.
In the script tag, yeah.
It could be. And if people are cringing out there, I totally get it. Go put it in go put it in a JS folder. I'm not telling you, but
I'm cringing from the fact that you're saying we can write JavaScript and have it run inside of a Blazor app. I know you can. I know it's just web.
Absolutely.
It's just web. But that tears at the foundations of, well, that's not what Blazor does, right? It's supposed to be writing all C# code and having that run interactively.
Sure. So. I think there's two, and I know we got to get moving. There's two pieces that I would say there. And boy, maybe this helps people frame it the appropriate way. The folks over at Coder Foundry, I feel terrible that I'm not going to get this. Maybe I will while we're talking, because I think it's totally unfair to mention this. They did. Remember when I used their app, their movie app, as a demo? Yeah. So in that movie app, and it might start talking. So, it's not even going to do that. I'm going to get an ad first. But this is it here. Coder Foundry. You should definitely look. They just hit 100K subscribers. Congratulations. Nice. I didn't know that. So great. These folks are great. He does a great job. This particular demo, this movie demo, which I'm just going to let play here so you can see it, up in the upper left-hand corner, you switch between server-side rendered, stream rendering, Signal R server, right, WASM, and auto. And that's awesome.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
It's the same app rendered 5 different ways. Well, in order to get the one on the far left working, to go ahead and make an API call and to update the page, it's JavaScript. Because it's server-side rendered.
Yeah.
And then once you get over to the interactive version, Signal R, WASM, Auto, it's what we would expect to iState in C#. So I believe that certainly it's fair to say that one of the reasons why people choose Blazor is I don't want to write JavaScript, I want to write C#. I totally get that. But another reason why the server-side rendering mode exists in Blazor is, remember, we are trying, when I say let me not say we, that's totally wrong. The ASP.NET team is trying to enable new scenarios that are not possible when interactivity is required, such as static sites.
Yeah. Static
site rendering. Maybe we could have static site builders that use Blazor and use components, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And so necessarily, if you've taken that choice that I'm static rendered only, this is the world you're stuck in. Stuck in. And I don't even say like it's bad. I don't dislike JavaScript. You are going to be mixing JavaScript and C#. If that bothers you, which I totally understand if it does, let's also consider the point that if you chose Blazor in the first place,
right,
you're making a choice between it and maybe a React or a Vue.
Mm-hmm.
You probably want interactivity. Otherwise, you're probably not using a SPA anyway. You to just do Ruby on Rails, MVC, Razor pages. What are you doing?
Right.
So I feel like the stubbornness that I've displayed is purely for learning purposes, and that the reality is most people who reach for a component-based framework probably want interactivity and are going to be doing Blazor server, and none of this is going to bother them. except for the fact that how do we get a login and logout system to work when HTTP context goes null on us, right?
Right.
So
back to that question.
That definitely is now a different show.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, no. It's 9 o'clock, right? It's time for stand up, as they say. So,
but that also gives us the foreshadowing of what to see next time we do this.
Yeah. We've definitely got more work to do. So, anyways, Hope that helps people. I know that it kind of diverges from what we thought the topic was going to be, but it turns out you actually learn a lot by, I tried to do this on my own and look at what happened. Yeah. I never answered the navigation manager question, and it's because, and this is in the comments, we'll have to go look for it. Navigation manager operates by exception. There is a top level exception handler that catches a navigation manager exception and says, you wanted to redirect. So that's how it works. That is how it works. And, I'm not sure exactly how did I figure that out? I think I came to redirect manager, redirect to, and yes, there it is. During static rendering. So actually I take it back. It's only during static rendering. During static rendering, navigate to throws a navigation exception, which is handled by the framework as a redirect. So as long as this is called from a statically rendered identity component, the invalid operation exception is never thrown. So because in the templates, they have a redirection system that relies on server-side rendering. That's why they made the identity endpoints, to make sure this is all happening server-side. This works.
Wow.
What I'm unclear about is how does it work from components too? I don't know those answers quite yet.
Okay.
I hope I said that correctly. If anybody from the team, ASP.NET team, is watching, I hope I got that right from the comment. I have not gone any further there. But I should let you take us out because it's now 9:02.
Yes, and I think we all have to get to stand up here. So that was awesome. Love this deeper dive into the cool components inside of Blazor and just the underworkings of it. Regardless of whether hitting authentication or not, we're seeing a lot of the underworkings of what the platform does. So hopefully that's helpful for you, and that's why you're watching. And if you're seeing this in the future, because all of our videos are up on YouTube/TheDevTalkShow, leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. Let us know that you're, that this has been helpful for you, and what you kind of, are the places you want to see us dive into as well. So with that, I'm going to wrap up the show today. So for Chris Gomez, my name is Rich Ross, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time on the Dev Talk Show.